Hello everyone, Bogdan Lupu here from AWS. We will shortly start in about a minute. Let's give everyone a chance to log in. Well, let's kick this off. So hello and welcome to our webinar on how to sell backup as a service, webinar dedicated to managed service providers. I'm going to quickly go through a couple of housekeeping items. So this webinar is recorded and everyone attending will get the recording by email. You can ask questions at any time through the Write Off Questions section, and we will have a Q&A section at the end. My colleague Sebastian Straub and I will be presenting. So Sebastian is a Senior Solutions Architect at AWS. He has over 20 years experience in IT and security with large companies such as Dell, Oracle, and the U.S. Department of Defense. I myself I'm a part of marketing manager at AWS with a little over 10 years experience in sales and marketing, working together with MSPs and the channel in general with companies such as Bitdefender, IBM, and now AWS. So Sebastian, I would love to give the word to you.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's get started. So the world of service is ending. There's absolutely no denying that. And physical servers are increasingly becoming obsolete. Whenever I speak to clients, it's never a question of if they will move into the cloud. It's always when they will move. Or more often than not, they're already there. Some of the clients I work with, they're far ahead of the curve. They already have a 90% or even 95% cloud presence. So the state of the public cloud. Well, so some of the forecasts, they tell us that the cloud is increasingly becoming more and more important. And I love what AWS has done for the IT landscape. Anywhere anyone has access to the kind of tech resources that previously only large companies could afford. There's no initial outlay of funds, and I don't have to worry about my hardware becoming obsolete because it's all virtual, right? It's all in the cloud, it's all self-renewing, and Amazon AWS commands around 43 to 45% market share. This constantly changes a little bit, then closely followed by Microsoft Azure Cloud at about 15%, and they're trying to narrow that gap. IBM and Google right below 10%, and the next 10 cloud providers combined make up around 15%. So it's clear to see why AWS is so popular, and there's no denying it. It's essentially the McDonald's of cloud providers. So some alarming numbers. These are some truly alarming numbers. These situations happen all the time. The most recent one was just about 3 weeks ago when an admin of a British company found out he was going to get laid off. He got quite angry and deleted over 500,000 British pounds worth of critical business data. That's almost $700,000 US. And these breaches and outages usually come from the inside. And in those cases, you need to be able to quickly and efficiently get the data back. The cloud is vulnerable, and we do talk to customers, and sometimes this is not apparent. The people who work with the cloud are, unfortunately, the weakest link. Then on-premise threats that we're all familiar with, they still exist in the cloud. Nothing really has changed, and downtime does happen. The cloud isn't up 100% of the time. Just recently, what was it, about 4 or 5 months ago? East 1 in the AWS cloud went down for an extended period of time. So outages can actually happen in the cloud as well. And of course, a cloud account that you have can be compromised. So what you're seeing here on the screen right now, that's the AWS shared responsibility model. That's nothing new. That's straight from this website. So what you're seeing here, that portion in yellow-orange, that's what AWS is responsible for. They're responsible for the hardware that contains the EC2 instances, the storage that's attached to that, the availability zones, the regions, the data centers. All of that is something that AWS is going to take care of. What goes unnoticed is that there is still a customer responsibility, and that's the portion right there in blue, and I always joke around, that's the portion that makes you blue, because that's still your responsibility. So the data that's stored in these niches, in these servers, the operating system, the patching of the operating system, all of that is still your responsibility. So really, compared to on-prem models, not much really has changed, right? So why do I need to protect my AWS? Well, EBS failure. EBS failure is something that can happen. EBS has failure built into the system. This is something that a lot of people aren't quite aware of. So for example, when you go to the AWS website, then you will see that the EBS failure rate is, well, a lot lower. The annual failure rate is anywhere between 0.2 to 0.3%. That makes them 20 times more reliable than legacy hard drives, but there's still failure. So even if something is in the cloud, there is still failure built into the concept, into the system. What that means in numbers, that if you have 1,000 EBS volumes, you will lose 2 of them a year. And the biggest threat is that you don't get to decide which ones fail and are gone forever. It could be an important customer database. It could be a document repository. So data loss could very well spell corporate disaster of epic proportions. So that's something to take into consideration. And let's talk about epic proportions. I always bring up this example. If you want to sleep well tonight, don't do what I'm going to tell you next. Don't Google the words code spaces. Code Spaces is a company that went out of business a few years back. They did all the right things. They even performed backups, but they didn't create cross-account backups. So their primary AWS account was hacked. They got a ransom note. They said, we're not going to pay, and the hacker then deleted all of their mission-critical data. Code Spaces went out of business within 24 hours of the attack. How's that for a nightmare? AZ failure. It does happen. Regions do go down, and you need to be able to get this data back up and running in another AZ, another region, or even perhaps in another AWS account altogether. So this is something that's of tremendous importance as well, because if your data is only stored in one single AZ in one region, and that region goes down for an extended period of time, then truly your disaster recovery plan is hope and prayer. So that's where the backups come into play as well. And, well, probably one of my favorite ones is human error. I always say the most dreaded word in IT is, oops, accidental deletion of an instance, a database, or some important data. And I hear these horror stories all the time. I've lived them. The database admin worked over the weekend, pulled an all-nighter, and then accidentally deleted the database. That can happen. That has happened before. So that's why managed backups are essential. So Bakken, did you want to tell us something about that?
Yeah, this is actually a question that probably a lot of clients ask. Okay, so I'm moving all of my data, all of my infrastructure into the cloud. Why do I actually need to work with a managed service provider? And well, this has probably 100 answers. Most of them you have touched upon before, but I think in terms of making sure that you profit the most out of working with the public cloud as your main infrastructure and working with a managed service provider, you actually profit from the true potential that the cloud has to offer. And the business continuity has practically never been more available to both service providers and clients at any given time until now. So even if one of the worst case scenarios which Sebastian mentioned earlier should happen, you as a managed service provider can facilitate your clients with instant recovery within seconds, minutes, depending on their infrastructure, when that's actually needed. And that provides the business continuity and the ease of mind that your clients actually need. Moving data from one place to another, from one region to another, is also something that you could easily do while running your backups and working with this program. And the expertise you actually have and obtain as a managed service provider, dealing with different infrastructures, different clients, different environments every day, is something you can replicate and something all of your clients would then benefit in using. So this comes actually as the missing puzzle piece. I love this graphic so much. So Sebastian, can you walk us through it a bit?
Oh yeah, we always call it the promise of the cloud finally delivered. So what you're seeing here is, well, it's puzzle pieces. On the left side of the screen, you have what AWS provides. It provides very durable Amazon EBS snapshots. They're very fast, very efficient. They provide APIs, CLI, durable storage, and talking like the S3 and so on, and then AWS Lambda scripting to automate processes, and then of course you also have the regions and the availability zones. All of that is absolutely fantastic. It's great. But it's not the entire picture. So in order to really complete the entire picture, that's what you're seeing here on the right side of the screen. So that's where Beam N2WS comes into play. We have the ability to also back up the infrastructure that goes along with the data. If you just simply have a backup of your data, let's say a server, let's talk about on-prem backup. If I have a server without any cables, switches, routers, without any connectivity, that server isn't going to do me much good. So that's why the VPC backup is really important as well. Archiving into S3, that's going to really lower your storage cost. Then also file level recovery. I don't necessarily want to recover an entire instance or an entire volume. Sometimes, more often than not, it's going to be, hey, I need just one particular folder, just one particular file. Then the auditing, reporting, and alerting. And that's as important as it's always been. We do need to have the ability to actually get into detailed auditing reports so that you can pass audits, security audits. And then also the application consistent backups. When you're performing backups off your databases, you do want to have that application consistent backup so that when you do a recovery from that database, you want to be able to immediately start working with it. And of course, probably one of the most important things is a simple and easy to learn user interface, something that I can easily task anybody to do.
Yeah, so this was actually something that one of our longtime partners, Lancome Technology, they're based in Sydney. They have used our solution to provide backup and recovery for their clients because they have saw a need to add this service and fell in love with the solution. And something that Imran Sadiq always said is not having a backup is something you cannot recover from. Regardless of the infrastructure you're running, regardless of the public cloud, it really doesn't matter who codes in your company. If you don't have something to back up from, you cannot recover for any type of disaster. So this is actually something that all of our partners use in one form or another, and they actually tap into this resource as an additional business resource they can actually provide to their clients. So this brings us to the MSP partner network, which we have built for our MSP community. And Sebastian can walk us through some of the main features which were built on top of our product addressing the MSP audience.
Sure, yeah. So the benefits for service providers. I think at the top of the list is don't leave money on the table. So have a DR plan in place for your customers. You'll find that a lot of customers who want to move into the cloud, who want to make use of the cloud, don't really know what to do once they are in the cloud. So it's very important to be able to very quickly restore these workloads. And as we already mentioned a couple times, in different regions, in different accounts if necessary. And of course, you can also increase your revenue and your profits just simply by producing very low RPOs and RTOs. The RPO is, well, when is somebody going to start crying when you lose data? And with our product, it's possible to have an RPO of 5 minutes. Some of our customers actually produce backups in 5, 10, 15-minute intervals. And something really terrible does happen, I'll just simply dial back 5 minutes and I'm back in business. And also decreased RTOs. So when is somebody going to start getting annoyed when the system isn't up and running? We have the ability to have RTOs on 30-second marks. You actually have the ability to restore an entire workload in 30 seconds. Also very important, once customers take a look at our product, they realize, okay, backup and recovery, you guys got that down, but how can you help me save money? And that is something that's tremendously important as well. We do utilize snapshots. That's what makes us so fast and efficient. But at the same time, snapshots are very pricey. So that's why we offer the ability to actually archive long-term archival backups into S3. And you can reduce your storage costs up to 60%. So if you take a quick look at your cost or your customer's cost for storage, the majority of that, it's probably going to be the backups, and we can cut that number in half. Multi-tenancy, that's really important as well. So you don't need to deploy an AWS backup and recovery server for each of your customers. Not at all. You have one single installation of the product in your environment, and that supports multiple AWS accounts. All you have to do is just simply give them access to it. Single pane of glass. That's something that's really important as well. With the native tools, I'm sure you have tried this before. All you're ever going to see is one slice of the pie. You're going to see one account. You're going to be able to see one region where the backups are being performed. Not so with AWS. That's going to give you a single pane of glass. You're going to be able to see all the backups performed in all the regions, in all of the different accounts. And I already mentioned, we have a very simple and intuitive UI. So it's very, very simple to use, and I can teach somebody AWS backup and recovery in mere minutes. It's very intuitive. I already did mention the reporting. So if you want to pass security audits, you need to be able to produce these reports. And we also have a RESTful API, which allows us to actually feed all of this reporting and auditing data straight into a third-party product, into a log consolidation tool. Our system can also tie into ticketing systems using that RESTful API. And then, of course, we also have what we call independent users. You know the sort. Those are the customers who are saying, well, I want to use your system, but I want to do it all by myself. I usually refer to these as the power users. They want to create their own policies, they want to create their own schedules, and they don't need help in order to perform it other than giving them access to the actual service. And you have that flexibility. So you can create these independent users. They want to do everything by themselves. Or you can also create managed users. Managed users, those are the guys who are saying, well, I just want to reap the fruits of your labor. I just want you to set it up. I want to have the ability to log in and maybe run reports, maybe see what's going on. So, Bogdan, did you want to tell us a little bit about the MSP growth model?
Yeah, so I think a big part of what I do on a day-to-day basis and what my colleagues do is talk a lot with our partners, and this helps us not only develop our product further, but better understand their own needs. So one of the main things that our partner program offers an MSP when collaborating with us is a growth model licensing. So this means that we have gone a step ahead and said, okay, you guys are going to want to use this for your clients, but you cannot just start using it for all of your clients immediately. So you need to work your way up. You need to have your own resources, learn a solution, which does not take that long, but you still need to have an onboarding process. So the entire licensing plan is a pay-as-you-go MSP license, which allows you to use to pay for only for what you actually use, and that's something that you are going to further implement for your client. So it doesn't have any significant investment tag along. Mostly important for our European partners, the GDPR and other certifications, which we try effortlessly to comply with, not only on a GDPR plan, but also working a lot with the AWS GovCloud and having partners working with public sector clients. We do offer a lot of regulatory criteria. On top of it all, with our last release, the 2.5, we went a step forward and added a resource control module to our solution, which helps you as an MSP actually manage the EC2 instances for your clients. So if you have like a development environment which you manage for your clients, you can just schedule when it runs and when it doesn't run. So this is a huge cost-saving feature that we have mainly built with our partners in mind. So Sebastian, I think we've talked a lot about all of this, but would you like to walk us a little bit through the solution?
Absolutely. This is my favorite part. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And in a moment, you're going to see my web browser. There we go. All right, so I'm going to talk you through the installation, the configuration of N2WS Backup and Recovery, and how easy it is to actually use it. So first off, the question we usually get is, well, how do I get a hold of this software? Is this some software package? Not at all. It's just simply an appliance you can pick up in the AWS marketplace. That's where we're currently at, and the first decision that you have to make is you just simply choose which region you'd like to spin us up in. Well, once you make that decision, you hit the continue button, and then N2WS Backup and Recovery starts spinning up in your environment in about 60 seconds. And this process is very quick, and also it only requires a T2 small instance, so it's extremely lean. Once it's spun up, you can communicate with it through a web browser, and this is what it looks like. As you can imagine, mine is already spun up, it's already configured, so that's why it's waiting there, waiting for me to log in. Now, this also provides the multi-tenancy portion. This means that the users that you allow access to the system, perhaps those independent users that we talked about, they would be able to log in right here, and they wouldn't even be aware of the fact that somebody else is using the solution as well. And as you can see, we also do support identity providers. So if you have Active Directory Federation services or a single sign-on solution which speaks SAML, that's going to work just fine. So let's log in as the root admin user into my environment, and I'll show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like. Now, I know it's a little bit confusing. I remember the first time I saw our solution, but trust me, in about 10 minutes, you're going to be an expert at this, because it really is that simple. That's that simple UI we've been talking about. You have this blue band up here with the different tabs, Backup Monitor. That's your single pane of glass. See, that shows me all of the different customers that I'm taking care of, and I can see their different backups. This would not be the case for independent users. If they do require that secret environment where they want to manage everything on their own, then that really would be for their eyes only. I'm going to be able to see all of the backups performed across all regions, across all different accounts right here. Of course, you can start filtering this, and you can also start searching for particular resources. So if your customer would ask you, hey, I need our web server to be recovered, really all you have to do is just simply type in what you're looking for, and it's going to show you all of the backups that actually contain that particular resource. Next to that, you have policies and schedules. And don't worry, I'm not going to bore you by showing you how to create schedules. But let's take a look at the policies, because that's where we decide what we want to back up. And that's really how flexible we are. When you create a policy, you can easily assign it to an AWS account. You can also assign it to a backup and recovery user. And that would be your customers and also different groups of users. In generations to save, this is where you assign the retention policy, and lastly, you then assign it to a schedule or even multiples if you want to create that grandfather, father, son methodology. Then assigning what you want to back up is also very simple. Here I have a policy already in place. This one backs up my Windows instances, my Linux instances. And then all you have to do is go to Backup Targets and then choose which services in AWS you'd like to back up. Add instances, I always refer to that as the easy button, because this allows me to actually select an instance, and automatically it will select all of the metadata that goes along with it, the configuration data, and also all of the volumes. So I don't have to start playing a puzzle game where I have to figure out which volume goes with which instance and which devices do I need to attach them to. It's really that simple. It works like your brain. If you're thinking servers, you're probably thinking entire entities, and that's exactly how that works. Now, if you really wanted to, you do have the option to back up only volumes by themselves. Some customers do that if they have data at rest and that sort of thing. You can also use our product to back up RDS databases, all of the different flavors, Aurora clusters, Redshift clusters, and DynamoDB tables. Selecting instances is really very simple. All you have to do is you just choose the region where you want to back up from. That also includes the different accounts based on the policy we just created. And then it's really just point and click. You just choose what you want to back up. Click Add Selected, and that's really all there is to it. From that point on, it will start creating backups into the same region where the data is currently residing. But if you were listening in the beginning, then you already know, well, what about disaster recovery backups? Because regions, that's not the end all. They do have the ability to go down. So that's where the disaster recovery backups come into play. That's the DR button right here. So here I can choose, well, every time you create a backup, also create a backup into a different data center somewhere else in the world. And down here, that's the ultimate in peace of mind. That's the cross-account disaster recovery. Remember earlier that story about code spaces? It's exactly what they needed. They needed to have the ability to perform backups of their data into a different, separate, unrelated AWS account, and that would be your backup vault. Even if you lose access to your primary account, you can still then spin up the data in that secondary account or from that secondary account. Now, I'm not going to tell you any secrets here, but all the backups in the world aren't going to do you much good if it's very difficult and time-consuming to get the data back into play. So let's play through how we recover data. So first off, let's just start filtering for the data that we want to recover. So I'm going to choose one of my instances here within my Windows environment. And I'm performing backups every day, but using our product, as I mentioned earlier, you could perform backups every 5, 10, 15 minutes because all the backups are only going to be incremental backups. So when I click on Recover, then I can choose to recover the data into a different region. I can recover the data into a different AWS account because I actually performed the disaster recovery backup into a different separate account. I also have the option to recover from that separate account. Now over here we do have 3 different modes for recovery. You can recover an entire instance. That's the worst case scenario. Somebody intentionally or unintentionally deleted an instance. I need to be back in business. I need to recover it as fast as possible. That would allow me to do that. I can recover the entire instance plus all of the metadata. And I'll show you that in a moment. Volumes only recovery, well, that allows me to recover only particular volumes from a backup set. And it's not all or nothing. I can actually pick and choose what I want to recover. And then this is not for show. I can make changes to the type. I can change how the IOPS. I can attach this volume to a different instance. Or if I wanted to, I even have the option to switch attached volumes and delete the old ones. So this allows me to hot swap a volume into a running system. And then last but not least, and I already mentioned that earlier, Explore. It's that file and folder level recovery. So this allows me to actually pick and choose what I want out of a backup. Because more often than not, it's going to be somebody saying, I accidentally overwrote a configuration file. I accidentally deleted a really important Excel sheet or a really important PowerPoint, or I just need this one folder. So when I click on Recover, that's going to bring up a file manager right here within the web portal. So nobody needs to have access to the AWS console. I can then just browse through the information, and I can pick and choose what I actually need. This just happens to be a Windows file server, but it doesn't matter at all. AWS is completely OS agnostic. Doesn't care if it's Windows, doesn't care if it's Linux, doesn't even care if the data is encrypted, because we also have the ability to recover data, backed up encrypted data into other regions and into other AWS accounts altogether without the end user having to worry about the KMS encryption keys. We're just going to manage all of that for you on the back end. All right, we talked quite a bit about Windows. Let's switch to Linux just to shake it up a little bit. Let's actually do a recovery now. Over here, that's my Linux policy. So I'm going to click on Recover, and I'm going to do a recovery of an entire instance. And that's my SQL instance. So I'm going to do instance recovery. Well, that's going to take us to the metadata I was talking about earlier. So we know exactly which VPC, which subnet, which IP address that instance had, which security groups it was attached to, and also the instance type. We do also preserve tags. So if you or your customers use custom tags, we're going to preserve those as well. If I scroll all the way to the bottom, recover instance, that's going to allow me to, well, recover the entire instance. But you can always change your mind. So that means I can switch it into a different subnet if I wanted to, different VPC, I want to assign it to a different IP address, maybe add a security group to it, or maybe we always talked about that we needed to change the instance type. I can do that as we're performing a recovery. If you choose to recover into a different region or into a different account, it's not going to be all, right? Because just recovering the data, just throwing the server over the fence isn't going to be good enough. You do need that infrastructure, the VPC settings, the subnet settings, the routing tables, the security groups. Again, I don't have to start guessing things. That's the button you want to look for. Clone original VPC and all of the associated settings. It will automatically select everything as it has to be in my selected region and in my selected account. Now in my case, my instance is still up and running, so I don't want to cause an IP conflict, so I'm going to blank this so that AWS is allowed to assign a different IP address to it. So I'm going to click on Recover Instance. It's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? You want to recover this entire instance right now, right in front of everybody? Sure, why not? What's the worst that can happen? All right, so overall one instance was launched. Now if we're quick enough, I can actually show you what that looks like in my EC2 console. All I have to do is just refresh that screen, and we will be able to watch the data being recovered right in front of our eyes. There it is. It's still pending, and it's probably going to stay like that for another 20, 25 seconds. Remember the promise that I made earlier, recovery within 30 seconds. Now, that button here is still yellow, and it's going to turn green in a moment. The moment that button turns green, because of a feature that Amazon calls the lazy loading feature, that instance will be fully functional and operational. I mean, in the case of my SQL database, I can immediately start hitting it with SQL transactions. It's not going to time out. I'm not going to get any error messages. So that instance is fully recovered now. And again, I didn't have to figure out which volumes do I need in order to do that. It was just completely recovered. Now let's switch back to the main console. I did mention that you have the ability to manage multiple AWS accounts in a single installation. That's the multi-tenancy, right? And you do that up here under Accounts. You just simply tell us which AWS accounts of your various customers we are allowed to use, and then we can perform backups in each of those accounts. We also have the option to go cross-account as well. You give other users, customers, access to the product over here under Users. And you probably already heard that, the independent and managed users, and I don't have a lot of imagination, so I just simply named my demo user independent and managed. The independent users, these are really the power users. They want to do everything themselves, and you can give them that ability. Perhaps you even decide to charge them more for that little bit of independence. Or you also have the managed users, the ones who are saying, well, can you set it up for me? I don't actually want to do it myself. All of this power comes with detailed auditing, because that's really what's important. So that's what these audit report buttons are for. So if you need to be able to prove what a certain user's been up to, you could certainly do that. So I can see if somebody logs in, logs out, does a file level recovery, does an instance recovery, makes changes to the configuration, anything you can do within the product is actually audited down to the minute. And as I also mentioned, you can use our RESTful API to feed all of this information into a log consolidation tool. Each of the users, each of the customers that you're giving access to, they have their own auditing, their own notifications, their own reporting. It's as if they are in control of the entire solution. And if you don't want to give them access to the fact that somebody else is using it as well, they wouldn't even be aware of that. Down here you will find additional reports. So if you need to prove to an auditor you're performing backups, that's the report you want to take a look at. And one thing I can absolutely guarantee you, because it happens every single time when somebody starts using our product, the question usually comes up, what are we not backing up across all of the different regions and accounts? That's this button right here, Unprotected Resources Report. You can also inverse that question. You can say, well, the opposite. I want to see everything we are backing up. That's the protected resources. Now, I did mention notifications. That's important because you want to know when something happens. So that's what the notifications are for. So I can set up daily summaries. Thumbs up, everything's going fine. And that will also contain any housekeeping items. Hey, you have a policy that's not doing anything. You have a policy that's completely empty, that sort of thing. If something does go wrong, then we also have the option to trigger alerts. Let's say the region is down, that's why we can't back up from it. That would be pretty bad, and you would immediately find out. Now, one thing that's really important, and you've probably seen this in the name of this webinar, backup as a service and disaster recovery as a service. It's very important to know that N2WS backup and recovery is not a software as a service solution. And that's really important because that means that you're not reliant on some service being up and running in order to perform backups and restores. This belongs to you. You're in complete control of this. And another thing is when you're offering this service to your customers, the backups are being performed in their accounts. That means the data never goes over the wire. The backup data never even flows through our solution. We're facilitating the backups without ever actually having to process that data. So that's really important as well. You can even configure N2WS backup and recovery to backup itself. That's my very first backup policy. I also have a disaster recovery backup of the solution in another region and in another account. If I have that situation where the region that's hosting my backup solution is actually the region that's going down, you can just simply recover it through the marketplace. So all you have to do is just simply spin up backup and recovery in the designated disaster recovery region, hit the continue button, spin up takes about 60 seconds, and then once it spins up, it's going to ask, are you spinning up a brand new version or are you performing a disaster recovery? If I say disaster recovery, that's the data. It will automatically find it, offer to import it, and that import process takes about 30 seconds. So after 90 seconds, you're fully recovered, and then the ability to recover the rest of your production environment. Remember earlier when we did a recovery, that only took about 30 seconds. So it doesn't matter if we're recovering one instance or 20 instances, because we have the ability to simultaneously recover all of those instances at the same time. That's where we usually tell customers RTOs of less than 5 minutes are absolutely doable, easily achievable. We also have the option to perform application-consistent backups. That's important for your database servers. And we can achieve this on Windows-based machines and also on Linux-based machines. I did mention about the cost savings. So this is something that you can also then give to your customers. That's the S3 repository. Each of these customers can just simply define their own S3 buckets, And then under policies, you can create archiving policies. See over here, copy to S3. So this is my policy. I'm creating daily backups. I'm keeping 3 of the most recent backups and snapshots. That's my rapid recovery. And then past that point, I'm keeping 14 days worth of backups in S3. But of course, there's absolutely nothing to keep you from raising this to weeks, months, or even years. And as I mentioned, S3 is a lot cheaper for that archival, anywhere between 40 and 60% cheaper. So it makes a huge difference. And when you're recovering from S3, there's absolutely nothing new to learn. Simple UI is very important to us. And you'll see how easy. All you have to do is just click on Recover and then Restore from the S3 repository. That, of course, also gives you the option to restore into any region and into any account. Remember that you do have the ability to clone VPC settings, all that infrastructure. That's very easily done. Over here, clone VPC. I can then just simply choose the different settings that we've captured, and then I can also choose a capture date. So if somebody needs the database server to be back in the state it was in on March 6th, I can do you one better. I can also recover it including the configuration settings, the infrastructure settings. You know how it goes. Sometimes somebody makes a change to a security group, it gets unnoticed, it goes undocumented, and nobody knows about it, but we do because we monitor the configuration settings, and if there is a change, we're going to capture that change. Then you choose which region, which account you want to clone this information into, clone VPC, and you're done. That entire process takes about 30 seconds. If you do feel so inclined, you can even take that entire configuration and export it into a CloudFormation template. So that gives you the ability to even have an offsite backup of your configuration settings. The S3 repositories come in also very handy for multi-cloud. I'm sure when you talk to your customers, you're going to hear that because it's really the buzzword, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. So when these archives are produced under the S3 repositories, then the Veeam Availability Suite can actually connect to these archives, mount them as an external repository, and then recover that data back on-prem into Azure Cloud, into Google Cloud, into VMware, wherever you'd like. So that opens up a whole new area because that gives you the multi-cloud, the hybrid cloud capability. And if, I always joke around, if Jeff Bezos wakes up tomorrow morning and says, everything's going to be 3 times the price starting next week, no, not at all. This is going to be my way out. This is what's going to keep me from being vendor locked. Now, also we have resource control, and Bogdan already mentioned this. This has the ability to also save you quite a bit of money. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say some of the instances in your environment or in your customer's environment, they don't need to be running all the time. Development instances, for example. So I do have a group, I called it all non-essential instances. And then over here I have resource targets, and this is where I'm choosing the instances and the RDS databases that don't need to be running all the time. Well, right next to that I have an on and off schedule, so I can choose when will they shut off and when will they come back on. And on the weekend I don't need them running either. So suddenly these instances, they're not running 24 hours anymore, they're just running 8, 9, or 10 hours a day. That's going to drastically reduce the cost of the EC2 compute runtime costs. That can save you anywhere between 60 and 65%. And our marketing usually calls this the light switch, the on and off button. You also can turn on and off these sets as you see fit. You can even give your developers access to this console. They don't need to have access to the AWS console because you really want as few people to have access to the AWS console as possible. All right, well, so this is really a high-level overview of the solution. And I hope this makes more sense now, what we do and how we do things. So if you have any questions about this, keep typing them into the console, and we're going to address all of those questions during the Q&A session.
Wow, so thanks a lot, Sebastian. This was actually, in an in-depth overview, I feel like I know the solution even better, although I see it every day. Now that we have seen almost all of the capabilities of the solution, the main question is you as a service provider, how can you actually implement this, and how can you actually position your services, your backup and disaster recovery services to your clients? Because we have established that there is both a need from their client side, and the tools are available to you. And talking with most of our service providing partners, we saw that each and every one does a form of backup in one way or another. Even if they are working with AWS or not, they do need to back up their solution. But the ones that actually work with our solution have come to provide their clients with a multi-tiered security package. And what this means is you have the capability to restore data for your clients within seconds, if not minutes. Let's say minutes to be on the safe side, but it could be seconds as well. But if you're managing multiple accounts, you can actually split those and have service packages. You can name them whatever you want. I'm a marketer. I love the bronze, silver, gold scheme, but you can name them whatever you would like, and offer different SLA-based recovery times for your clients. You can have clients whose infrastructure are very time sensitive. You can offer a couple of seconds recovery time and ask for a premium. And you can have the basic package which you can then include on top of your services, where you just make sure that your client data is always available and the recovery time is slightly longer. And the most important part in addressing your clients is to move the entire conversation towards the business continuity aspect of everything, because then is the time when you can actually profit from everything that the public cloud has to offer, and your business is more or less always on. So what you as a service provider can offer them is that big red recovery button when something goes wrong, and we've gone through a couple of scenarios with Sebastian. You as their service partner have the ability to hit that reset button, hit that recovery button, and have their entire infrastructure, or only parts of it, or only the data that they have lost, back up and running. Now, looking a little bit into who you might be dealing with on a daily basis, we usually recognize two different distinct buyers when talking about backup and recovery services. You have a business buyer whose most important criteria are business relevant. They do want high availability. They do need to make sure that their business is always up and running, and that the least amount of resources are spent on both ensuring this and also on the data that you are storing. So this is a place where I would go ahead and mention our resource control solutions, and also the backup to S3, which can bring up to 60% savings on your storage costs. Then you have the technical buyer, because a lot of enterprise clients have technical departments also internally, even if they are working with service providers.
Oh, Wagner, I think you just lost connectivity on the audio. Well, Wagner, you back? See, this is what I'm talking about. These are the unexpected outages in technology. This just proves our point that there is a need for all of this. So, well, I think what Barton was saying is that you need to find out what your target audience is, your target group, who you're selling this system to. If you're selling this to small and medium-sized businesses, or if you're selling this as a service to a large enterprise. The system scales extremely well. A single installation of N2WS backup and recovery can actually handle thousands of instances. I have some customers that I take care of. They're backing up anywhere between 2,500 to 6,000 instances on a single installation. So it scales extremely well. Parkin, are you back now with us?
Yeah, terribly sorry. If only there was a backup solution for the phone line, that would have been fantastic.
That's right.
But I got interrupted. Yeah. So thanks for taking over. Yeah. So now let's also cover the main aspect of different infrastructure types in terms of your business partner. You might have SMB clients with smaller infrastructures, and enterprises working with multiple regions, multiple types of environments, and that's an approach which you then would need to take a little bit differently. For an SMB, you don't have a dedicated support line within the organization, so they rely almost 100% on you as a partner. You need to offer direct support and need to be able to ensure that at 2 a.m. if they actually have an issue, you do have that reset button I mentioned earlier, and you can provide a service to them almost instantly. Their entire business relies on you helping them keeping their infrastructure up because they cannot afford having any type of downtime. Now, working with an enterprise, there is the consultative approach, where you and your enterprise partner work on the architecture of the entire environment together. You consult them on best practices and the best way to structure their data and their entire environment. And this is somewhere where you can provide a lot of consultancy in making sure that their infrastructure is always up and running. And of course, costs are probably the main factor here. Having a huge infrastructure, large volumes of data, every additional snapshot, if you have to back up your infrastructure across account, that could double your bill. But then you, as a service provider, can help them reduce those costs. You can use the resource control feature that we have mentioned earlier to help them reduce the runtime of their EC2 instances, and also enable them to do their backups to save their backups in S3 and reduce costs this way as well. Now, we did have more information about this. We have actually gone forward and talked with a lot of our partners and put all of that information together. We have a more extensive guide, which we will need a lot more than an hour to go through, but we will definitely send this guide alongside with the webinar recording to each and every one attending. And I think aside from having a short overview on our most engaged partners on a global level, people we have a lot of fun working with, and most of the clients that they are also managing directly, and a couple of our partners, we could now go into answering a couple of your many questions that I constantly see here popping up. Sebastian, would you like to choose one of them to answer?
Oh yeah, this is actually really good. We have a very very active group today, so I love when this happens. One of the questions was if we could elaborate a little bit more on some real-life disaster recovery scenarios. So I worked with one of our large European customers. It's Deutsche Bahn. And Deutsche Bahn has a very large IT infrastructure and they performed a worst case scenario disaster recovery drill. The reason why I call it the worst case is because they pretended that they lost access to a region, a data center, and on top of it, at the same time, they lost access to their AWS account. So it really doesn't get worse than that. And they were able to do a complete disaster recovery of their entire environment, which was 400 servers, 400 instances, in a little bit less than 30 minutes. And the only reason why it took actually 30 minutes is because they needed to orchestrate that the machines start up in a certain order. You know how it is. Sometimes Active Directory servers have to start up first and so on. So that's really a real-life scenario. So this isn't something in the lab. This is with a true real-life scenario with a customer of ours. There's another question which I thought was important, and I didn't really elaborate on this. So this question was, could you please explain on how to create an application-consistent backup for a database server? It's actually very simple. As I mentioned, it makes no difference if it's Windows-based or if it's Linux-based. If it's Windows-based, we do provide a thin backup agent. So the entire solution is completely agentless. Anything I showed you doesn't require an agent at all whatsoever. But for those cases where you do require an application-consistent backup, we do offer a thin backup agent on Windows-based machines, which allows us then to talk directly to VSS, the volume shadow copy service, and then force an application-consistent backup. And on Linux-based machines, we don't even require an agent. We do that with something called scriptlets. We do have a vast library of these scriptlets that already put a database into backup mode. It's as easy as just simply flipping a switch within N2WS Backup and Recovery, which says, oh, I need an application-consistent backup on this Linux-based machine, and then just simply the product does it for me. So it's very, very easy and very simple to implement. Then here is another question which I thought was important as well. So in terms of RTO, 30 seconds is quite impressive, but what does a recovery look like from S3? So this is interesting because you're absolutely right. There's a trade-off. The snapshots, that's your rapid recovery. That's where you get those RTOs of 60 seconds, 30 seconds from. When you're recovering from S3, well, there's the storage cost decrease, but that comes along with that the recovery is going to take longer. That's really just for your archival. So recovery from S3 is going to take a lot longer than the recovery from snapshots. So that's why you want to use your rapid recovery from the snapshots, and then you have the ability to restore archives from S3. And there is a throughput hard limit, and you can also customize that as well. You can either go with the default settings within N2WS Backup and Recovery, or you can say, no, I need that stuff from S3 very, very quickly, and I'm willing to pay the extra cost for the additional horsepower because, as I mentioned, the solution itself is very, very, very lean. It only requires a T2 small instance in the default settings. That comes out to be what? About $14 a month. But for those cases where you really need that horsepower to retrieve data very, very quickly from S3, you can, for a limited amount of time, then actually increase the instance type. So that's possible as well. And well, I think we have time for one more, and this is a really important one as well. And I didn't mention this, and I apologize for this. The question is, how can I automate all of this? That, of course, is also possible. So what I showed you is really the one-off, where you're creating policies and you're choosing what you want to back up and all of that. But we also have the ability to simply work through tagging. When somebody is spinning up a new instance, you can then allow them to just simply tag in AWS this instance and say, I want it to be backed up. And at the same time, that resource control also works through tagging as well. So you can choose then, well, when should that instance turn off and when should it turn on? All of that can be done through tagging, and the person doesn't even need to have access to the console at all. They can simply trigger the backups just through the tagging. So Bogdan, I think this is what we have time for, right?
Yeah, I think we're closely running towards the end. I do want to thank everyone again for attending. We will send the recording and the deck right after to each and every one. And you could, for everyone who has joined that are not already an existing partner, you could go ahead and register under our website /partners. It's very easy, and you can get in touch with anyone from our partner management to talk in more detail about your specific scenario needs and your clients. So Sebastian, I do want to thank you again for this very extensive presentation. It was great, and yeah, thanks everyone, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.